Bay Hill News Network is an internet radio. We are affiliate with Fun City Radio USA, Cancardi Radio and Success Radio Canada and Blaze Nation Media Group. You can find Bay Hill News Network at www.bayhillnews.net.
Nice Radio's Kalulu presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio. First aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. Remember, you can find us Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 23rd day of January 2021. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. Trump gone. Yes, Donald Trump gone. With Donald Trump no longer in the White House as the President of the United States of America, the majority of people globally who still believe in the philosophy of democracy, who still believe in fundamental decency, morality, and ethics, are gloating at the fact that Donald Trump is no longer in office. Many are breathing a sigh of relief that finally, there is a possibility that the United States of America can return to some sense of decency. But among the thousands, among the millions, among the billions of people around the world who are rejoicing at the demise of Donald Trump in the most recent elections, presidential elections in the United States. Among all of those are thousands of Caribbean people, resident, some citizens, some illegal, in the United States. The reality, dear friends, is that in the past several years, but in the past 4 in particular, peoples of the Caribbean who live, work, and reside in the United States of America would have experienced firsthand the persistence of white extremism. They would have experienced firsthand the readiness of the advocates of white extremism to rid the country of all but themselves. They didn't care where the rest of the people came from. Rid the country of all but themselves. Interestingly, when you saw blacks aligning themselves with the white extremists. You have an understanding of the legacy of conquest, colonization, slavery, etc., etc., etc. You have an understanding of what Frantz Fanon meant when he wrote Black Skins, White Masks, speaking to the legacy of colonialism in Algeria and the deep psychological consequences of that legacy. That people of color could have found themselves among the white extremists in the recent confrontations experienced in the United States of America. That is the same sort of legacy that prevents peoples in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and elsewhere in the Caribbean to continue to deny the existence of race as a factor in our respective societies. They blind themselves to the reality, if only because they would wish it away. Our Caribbean peoples in the United States ought to have come away from the last 4 years, in particular, with a better understanding of why it is not possible to leave the leaders of our Caribbean countries to sit in their ivory towers and determine among themselves with a few academics here and there what should constitute our reparation demands. Because many of them are merely looking at the cash that they will have access to build their own legacies. They're not in any way fundamentally different. So we can look at every one of our Caribbean countries, English, French, Dutch, Spanish, and see for ourselves the persistence of white extremism and the legacy of slavery, conquest, colonialism that has our peoples entrapped, enchained, and many eager to lie prostrate, because for them it does not matter how the dollar is made. It does not matter how the dollar is made, because they believe fundamentally you are measured by your wealth. You are measured by your wealth. You are measured by what you have been able to accumulate over time. They forget that very often they leave it and they lose it. And the many who insist that racism does not exist in our Caribbean countries still cannot explain to themselves, how is it race and ethnicity are supposed to be things of the past? All these divisions are things of the past. But look at the socializations processes. Look at what happens. Look at who marries whom. It is the odd case that we see a crisscrossing. There is no fundamental unity until we come to a recognition of what our reality is. It is perhaps most interesting and instructive, the words uttered by Joseph Biden the day before his inauguration, when he called on people to remember what happened, and indicated that it's not possible for us to go forward if we do not remember what happened, where we came from. And those who feel that we are exempt somehow from racism, systemic as many of us have found, must remind themselves, what of the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean? How have we treated them? They who possessed this land before the others came and brought us with them. What has happened to those peoples? In every major society, what has happened to the indigenous peoples? We are eager to claim reparations for what has been done to us in slavery. What about the reparation for those who were here before us? What about reparation for them? In our desire to grab hold of the spoils, we think not of those who came before. And we think even less of those who will come after. Greed is the hallmark of Caribbean politics. Greed is the hallmark of the legacies of one Caribbean leader after another, if you review the history of our region. Caribbean people in the United States of America ought to have come away from the last 4 to 6 years with a renewed sense of what racism looks like today, and discover, if they choose to analyze it, if they choose to engage their critical thinking skills, that racism today in the 21st century is pretty much what it looked like over the centuries past since conquest. Nothing has really fundamentally changed. But you're listening to Just Another Look. You hear it only on Nice Radio. Before we go into the main thrust of this week's program, we need to take a little step back to think of the workers once employed with Liat. Remember we used to sing that? Liat, the Caribbean airline. Liat, the Caribbean airline. But if you look at how those who were employed by the organization have been treated, then you have to understand the disconnect between referring to it once as a Caribbean airline and not thinking of those who were employed as Caribbean people. Today, those political leaders who were once touting Liat as the Caribbean airline, including our own Prime Minister, who boasted so often of what would become of Liat, because he was involved. Now that the whole thing has collapsed, there's a shirking or an apparent shirking of responsibility by political leaders, pilots, air hostesses, workers, who for years were prepared to accept less than what was the going rate for their salaries and wages. Give them an understanding and a commitment that, okay, this is a regional institution. We try to help it go forward. Let's see how we could make it work. They are now the ones sitting at home, utterly disappointed at the way in which they have been treated by the politicians of the sub-region. Disappointed at the way in which the politicians have exposed themselves as mouth champions, talkers, bigots. The workers have been left high and dry. We pointed out many years ago that in some countries, it was recognized that Liat was always heavily indebted. And so in some stations in some countries, Liat had a skeleton representative staff, and much of the day-to-day operations were farmed out to other organizations, so that there would not be a heavy burden should Liat go under. But St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we were different. We were employing Liat employees. We would keep them. We would do this for them. Now that Liat has collapsed, those employees at Liat have come to understand what constitutes political leadership in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Those across the Eastern Caribbean, particularly those in those other countries where the government continued to give them hope, made them feel that Liat was going to come someplace or go someplace. They are now wondering, why did we ever trust these politicians? They who came, glibly speaking, beating their chest, and trying to convince them as workers that they should participate in what should be a collective endeavor of us as a civilization. Now find out that talk of a Caribbean civilization is cheap. So cheap that you see no evidence of any concerted battle for the rights of the workers being undertaken by the politicians. The trade unions are left running from pillar to post, pulling hairs out of their heads, trying to understand how could these same politicians, who were once so eager to sell us and market Liat as a viable enterprise, are now turning the other way and saying, well, it collapsed, there isn't anything. Nothing from nothing leaves nothing. That's where we are today with Liat. But in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we want to remind the Liat workers, when you hear politicians tell you how much they love you, run for cover. Never allow yourselves to be down this road ever again. When they tell you how much they love you, run for cover. But you're listening to just another look. You hear it only on Nice Radio. You know, dear friends, we want to talk about our situation here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the amazing reality that confronts us today. And there is perhaps no better way to start the main focus of this week's program than by suggesting that we should spend some time educating our dear Prime Minister. You see, education has to be distinguished from certification. We have a tendency to confuse the two, and we say people bright because they have subjects. We say people bright because they have degrees, and the higher the degree, the brighter we believe they are. That is an unfortunate way of analyzing people. Just Another Look is very much aware that Ralph Gonsalves has a PhD. Yes, he has a doctorate. Never mind the fact that Randy Brewster, one of the candidates, who says he has a medical degree but whose certificate seems not to have the requisite amount of signatures that he's supposed to have. He says he has a medical degree, but he had difficulty distinguishing between a medical degree and a PhD. He apologized subsequently for his ignorance in that regard. Perhaps bearing testimony to the fact that certification does not relate necessarily to education. But Gonzalez has a PhD. And from all understanding, his PhD is in political economy. Political economy. But you know, some years ago, and you may recall, that in 2001, in the lead up to the general election, there was a letter to the editor penned by Matthew Thomas that made a case for Raul Gonzalez being supported as head of the ULP, supported to become the nation's prime minister. And Matthew Thomas at the time made the point that he was easily the brightest man for the job. Of course, years later, after Gonzalez became the country's prime minister, Matthew Thomas and Junior Backus spent some time on their own program on Nice Radio, trying to bring to the nation an understanding of what perhaps Matthew Thomas later found to have been, or earlier found to be, an error in his analysis of Raul Gonzalez vis-a-vis being brilliant for leadership. He seemed to have recanted on that position that he once took in 2001. And while some have been overly anxious to laud Gonzalez's brilliance, we've had Stewart, of Stewart Engineering, of course. When he was a member of Parliament, he had cause on more than one occasion in Parliament to declare openly to Parliament that while at the grammar school, the St. Vincent Grammar School, he defeated Raul Gonzalez in every subject, in every class, for the entire period at the St. Vincent Grammar School. So if brilliance is based on performance, he was more or less saying, well, I brighter than you. I brighter than you. And I say it is unfortunate because we have people who believe that if you collect certificates, that it is evidence of your brilliance. It is not. It is your capacity to earn certificates, just that, to pass an exam at a given period of time. Education is something that is exuded from the individual each and every time he or she opens his or her mouth to speak. It has to do with depth of learning, of understanding, and of being able to deliver what one has understood and to apply it to one's life. But we have spent a lot of time trying to tell people how they're bright. And you hear people saying, let's put this one and that person up to run for election because they're bright. And then you come back and you say, but wait a minute. If he's so bright, how come he can't manage your practice? If he's so bright, maybe he's too bright for his own good. If he's so bright, how come you don't understand the level of critical thinking or lack of critical thinking on the part of this or that individual? And successive generations of parents have been conned into believing that education equates certification, or vice versa, certification equates education. And it's the reason why, if you're seriously analyzing our society and extrapolate to an understanding of the Caribbean society, you become concerned as to the quality of your Caribbean Examinations Council's results. You become very concerned. Because when you match some of the grades with communication with this or that individual, you tend to find a significant disconnect. And you ponder whether the Caribbean Examination Council has reached a stage where perhaps, just perhaps, they may feel pressured by parliamentarians or politicians around the region to go easy on students. To go easy on students. We have said time and again, ask some of the businessmen the quality of the applications they get for jobs from students fresh from school with distinctions, who can't put a letter together, who have difficulty articulating in response to trying to apply for a job. That is our society today. Isn't it bothering us? Or are we just chalking up how many subjects you have? But you can't keep a good conversation and you're not in touch with world affairs and you can't apply what you have on your certificates to daily living. It's the reason why some people have their challenges as well with the University of the West Indies and ask, what are we doing about the quality of the end product? Or are we just simply saying, well, you know, there was a time when you had to have school leaving and GCE. Then there was a time when you had to have general, not basic, because nobody wanted basic. Now they want A-levels. Now they want degrees. And now they want masters, and pretty soon they may only want people with PhDs. Is that what our focus is? If there is an assumption that if you have a PhD, you're bright. That's it. But just another look says, without fear of contradiction, Gonzalez has a good brain. He also appears to have a photographic memory. He retains things. He remembers things very, very well. But just another look has often found reason to argue that there are times when one is forced to wonder whether Gonzalez's seemingly overinflated ego does not lead him to a rather hubristic approach to almost everything he does in terms of governance and politics. Is there arrogance? Is there chest thumping? Is there a sense of bravado that allows his academic achievement to be worn on his forehead? Is that what it is? You be the judge. But there is a sense which, if you read much of his writings, and you could start with his book on Caribbean civilization, for example, you may find significant repetition of ideas and concepts that leaves you wondering, hello, what happened here? And perhaps we've said in the past that may be why he has to give away so many of his books to his fellow politicians, particularly people in his party, because he recognized that perhaps they don't read them. And he may have difficulty selling them. But perhaps it is also a reality that Gonzalez understands that many of our people don't read, as is the case across the Caribbean. That is a well-known fact. We're not a reading people. And if you don't read, you have real challenges in life. And sometimes you go with the flow. By the time they finish, give you the speaker's qualifications, you already assume that it's a scholarly presentation without even bothering to listen to anything that is said. But from day one, Just Another Look has been urging Vincentians, please engage your critical thinking skills. Allow your education to lead you so that you can evaluate content. And so, engage in meaningful analysis that allows you to respond appropriately to what you are being told. Because sometimes people use fanciful words. They're very, very erudite. But what they have delivered is vacuous, empty. Nothing really of substance. But it sounds good. Great speech, bro. What did he say? What was the substance? We ain't sure, but it's sure as hell sound good. That happens sometimes. That happens perhaps all too often. And Just Another Look says that if you analyze some of what Gonzalez has been saying, in the recent past in particular, they appear to be what we refer to as chinks in his intellectual armor, leaving some of us to ponder whether an apparent desire to be perceived as some sort of grand leader takes precedence over what many would describe as good governance. The concept that the hubristic insistence, I can, only I will, may well be something that is taking greater and greater control of the individual. One, for example, cannot understand why, despite his much vaunted declaration in 2001 after winning the elections, that his mantra going forward would be together now. Yet if you examine his legacy through the years, you would realize that he failed to make any positive impact on St. Vincent and the Grenadines in this regard. Instead of any significant move towards unifying Vincentians, the country has become bitterly divided along political lines. It's difficult to understand how someone who we see as bright can allow under his watch a nation to become so divided. It begs the question, is it deliberate? Is it a throwback? Is it part of the legacy of conquest and colonization and slavery to divide and rule a people, even if you are one of those people? Even though you have emerged from among them. It is the reason why many of us asked in 2001 in his first independence address as Prime Minister, how could you simply hopscotch 17 years of governance in the country and pretend as though it didn't exist? How is that possible? How is it possible for an individual to have been so caustic about a previous administration that to give them the credit for 17 years of leadership voted on by the people of the same country that you now lead? What are you saying then about the people? They didn't understand what they were doing? They were forced to vote for another party for those 17 years? Is that what it is? But you can move and talk about being a 5-star general and a world boss because what? It suits your pride and purposes and you are singing your own praises? So one wants to understand how we define brilliance. How we define brilliance. You know, it's the same way many have found it more than a little disgusting for Gonzalez, an intellectual of sorts, to reach the point of using public platforms one after another to define people in this country as malignant and dishonest, minority wrongs, possessive of a sort of learned helplessness, lowest common denominator, dirty, stinking dog, etc., etc. To make reference to people sitting together and who George Bush in the middle of the night would recognize. To make fun of the middle finger and of the so-and-so hole. How we relate that to brilliance? Whatever you're going to say that we were using the language of the masses, or as was once said in respect of Glenn Jackson, sometimes you have to go down in the gutter with them. That has become normative in our society. That has become acceptable, and that is intellectualism and somehow brilliance. It could only happen if we have absolutely no respect for people. Only if we have no respect for people. Only if we see them by comparison as not worthy of being considered people, that we have to make references to them in such disparaging terms. Many students, dear friends, pass exams. But not all who do so will emerge as genuine intellectuals, as academics. But they may still be deemed bright. Because there are those who quick to tell you, you have to be street smart. Because common sense make before book. But it is so often the case that even those same intellectuals who turn around and endorse being street smart and suggest that there are people who, for one reason or another, did not have the opportunities to go to school or to go to the levels that they should have gone. Those same people turn around, and when they have the opportunity to impact change, organize administrative structures that pay little or no attention to experience. It doesn't matter that somebody with a degree comes back and somebody who doesn't have one has to teach that person the job. And while doing so, his or her remuneration is significantly less than the one they are teaching. But the one they are teaching gets the bigger salary because they have a certificate. That is the level of contradiction that exists in our society. In our current situation today, in Vincentian society, we are confronted by a trilogy of critical issues. And we go back to them. We have the COVID-19 pandemic. We have dengue. And on top of all of that, we have mama suffering. Mama suffering. Some people may add a thought and say, well, look, for the last 20 years or so, almost 20 years, we have to deal with Hurricane Ralph. So we leave that for a minute. But Justin Nunluk has made bold to state without fear of contradiction that Gonzalez and his administration may well be characterized as having been highly irresponsible in many respects. Irresponsible in confronting the trilogy of critical issues: COVID-19, dengue, and mama suffering. You see, the dengue situation is such that we know that CAFA and Caribbean Health Organizations cautioned us in January of 2019. January of 2019, that we can expect in 2020 the return of serious mosquito-borne diseases, particularly dengue. We had a year's notice. We had a year's notice. And the love that the government has for our country did not really manifest itself in the putting in place of measures in order to prevent the emergence of dengue in the way in which it would come back to St. Vincent and the Grenadines in 2020. Almost a year after we were warned that it was coming. So we had a year's notice. And all we are told by the health authorities, well, you know, we mentioned that. When we got the news in 2019, we mentioned that. But they cannot tell you what measures they put in place since having told us that, in order to have avoided the deaths that eventually emerged from the resurgence of dengue in this country. What were the preventive measures put in place so that we would not have been able to be counting the dead? And you know, a few weeks ago we had stopped counting. We had stayed at 7 dead from dengue. Now the numbers are increasing again. Where were these people with dengue over the last several months? Those who we are now attributing their death to dengue. So for all the brilliance that our leaders have, it does not appear to translate into the action that they put in place, given all the things that they mouth on political platforms and in their press huggings and press conferences and whatever else. Education allows you to translate your knowledge and experience into moving towards providing a better quality of life for our people. It is not what you think is the better quality of life, it's what the people enjoy as a better quality of life. You see, earlier this week, dear friend, Gonzalez addressed the nation. And he's the Prime Minister. He's the head of government. And so you listen. And you keep hoping that the address would not be what we have come to see as the norm. a set of fanciful terms, a set of political mamagism with little content, little substance. But lo and behold, at the end of the presentation, which lasted more than 45 minutes or thereabout, you came away with a sense of disappointment. And you came away feeling sorry for the presenter. Because you say to yourself, this is what we have become. The address was in and of itself disturbingly disappointing. But don't worry, the minions are anxious to tell you how well it was, how brilliant it was. Go and analyze it yourself. Apply your critical thinking skills, and you too may very well end up being bitterly disappointed. During the presentation on Mama Sufre, for example, Gonzalez enunciated that there is a plan. We have a plan in progress. We have a plan. But if you spend time listening to the address and was hopeful that somehow during that address you would have gotten a plan so that at the end of the address you'd be able to say to your friends and the family, well, here's the plan. You'd be sorely disappointed. You're still waiting on the plan. So after the address, the host of Just Another Look thought, well, look, let us check back. Find some sources, even a basic dictionary that will give me and us a definition of what constitutes a plan. Just to be able to be sure that, we're not talking out of turn. Because we were waiting on the plan. So the online dictionary defined a plan as, quote, a detailed proposal for doing or achieving something. That's what a plan is supposed to be. A detailed proposal for doing or achieving something. Another definition is, quote, an intention or decision about what one is going to do. An intention or decision about what one is going to do. And then the Cambridge Online Dictionary says, a plan is a set of decisions about how to do something in the future. Okay? So we have three definitions of what is a plan. Detailed proposals about what. So if you're telling us that there's a plan relative to Sufre, then when we listen to what you've said, we're supposed to have seen a set of proposals as to what people are expected to do with the different scenarios of Sufre. There we were told there are three possible scenarios. Remember when he said that? There are three possible scenarios. The dome could continue rising and then stop. The magma could continue rising and start to flow over the sides and remain at an effusive stage. And the third scenario is the eruption. Right? Forceful eruption. So those are the three scenarios. But you're trying now, having been told what the scenarios were, you're looking for the plan. You're looking for the plan. Well, friends, after 45 minutes, you're still looking for the plan. Go back and listen to this speech. Armed with the foregoing definitions of what constitutes a plan, Just Another Look returned to the Prime Minister's address to determine whether at any point he was in sync with what is generally considered a plan. and unable to arrive at a definitive answer, Just Another Look therefore poses the very same conundrum to you, dear listener. Did you get a plan? Revisit the 45 minutes or so of his speech. Did you get a plan? We ask you, the listening public, whether after listening to the Prime Minister's address, were you able to come away with any definitive understanding of any plan in existence to readily address and redress Mama Sufre, dengue, and COVID? You see, further, Just Another Look asks the Vincentian public that may have been able to identify a plan or plans from his address. Please, people, please, minions of the ULP, tell us what the plan is. Because perhaps you may have seen or heard something that we missed in terms of a plan. You see, we heard the Prime Minister declare that we have already identified the meeting points for people in the red zone in case an evacuation becomes necessary due to an explosive eruption. He did say something like that. Okay? But having said that they start looking and identifying meeting points, he didn't tell us of one. He didn't tell us of one. For reasons known only to himself, the Prime Minister did not indicate to the Vincentian populace the precise location of what he called meeting places. Of course, in going through literature, we remember that many, many years ago, because we've been doing this program since August of 1998, many years ago, Just Another Look raised the issue, because we have had natural disasters of varying degrees since that period. We raised the issue of muster points, which is what they're really called, muster points. Right? Where are they in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Do you know anywhere in this country where, in spite of our propensity for natural disasters of one sort or another of varying degrees, you can identify muster points located by those responsible for disaster preparedness, those responsible for risk management in this country? We've been asking for that for years, but nobody bothered. Yeah? We insisted that there is a need for muster points in the country. So when Gonzalez is talking about meeting places, they commonly refer to as muster points, official designation. Yeah? And it is defined as an area where everyone is ordered to go when there is an emergency. That's what a muster point is. That's what the meeting point he was talking about is. Right? And normally, what you do is you identify them at critical places in your country, particularly areas that may give rise, that may have emergency situations developing. And so you want a central place that people can go and that you can then marshal them. If you need to evacuate them, it is done in an orderly fashion, etc., etc. But while they are there, it is a safe place that allows them to feel comfortable, relaxed mentally and otherwise, that they are out of danger. Yeah, they are out of danger. In many countries, when you're engaging in major construction activities, there are muster points identified in the unlikely event that something collapses or some emergency comes out. There's a central point that you can go where you would be safe and they can come and deal with you and move you if necessary. But we've not paid much attention to that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But that is what he was referring to, that we're supposed to have muster points for people to go in the event of an eruptive explosion. And so people can feel safe and they can manage the evacuation process. Yeah? A muster point is a safe, geographically defined place where people converge in the event of an emergency, where they can receive information, where they can receive instructions, and where there can be a head count before rescue operations are initiated if necessary. Yeah? That's what you're talking about. In case of responding to emergency action in the event of evacuation of peoples in the red zone, or even if it becomes necessary, the orange zone in this country, muster points must be clearly identified and known to everyone concerned. And it's not just the people in the affected areas that you want to know where the muster points are. Because in a small society like ours, people may be going to help others get evacuated. So they need to know where the muster points are as well. It's not just the people in the immediate danger zone that need to know it. What this government and others before it have failed to do is to understand that because we operate on a zone of subduction, given one's understanding of tectonic plate movement, one of the most basic features in preparedness of the entire nation is the identification of muster points. If today or tomorrow we were, God forbid, exposed to a tsunami, we have no muster points identified in and around the country in the event of a tsunami. Yeah? We don't. In Kingstown, we have no designated muster point that the people of Kingstown know about. One would imagine that a good place to go might be Victoria Park or past their grammar school playing field, because generally wide open spaces that have no immediate buildings around them that would collapse is often considered an ideal place for a muster point. So what is the extent of our disaster preparedness? Or are we so deep rooted in adhocracy operating after the fact? Is it that we have undertaken major construction programs in this country, experienced disasters of different types, of varying degrees, and yet failed in respect of applying due diligence, where a fundamental safety measure, the identification of muster points, has consistently been overlooked? You know, LinkedIn note says, quote, "The assembly or muster point is often a landmark, and all personnel at offices and work sites are aware of and instructed, trained and informed to go straight to in an emergency situation. It is considered the safest place, at least for the time being." Importantly, emergency drill is always carried out to determine the workability of the emergency and evacuation plan. Emergency drill. You know why? Because when an emergency happens, people tend to lose their sense of reason. They panic. And they do whatever comes first to mind. That is why people are prepared and drilled. It is not enough merely to identify a muster point, but it must be it must be tested. It must satisfy the requirements in proving to be a safe place for people in case of emergency. And this is because circumstances change. And circumstances sometimes require a periodic reassessment of the originally established muster points. But we in Cincinnati Grenadines, and so we remain masters of adhocracy, masters of doing things after the fact. But our legacy leaves us believing that those who bright, just listen to them because they're bright. Remember, you are not to panic until you are given the order to panic. You know, in listening to Gonzalez, we have Eyewitness News, for example, saying that Gonzalez suggested, and we quote from Eyewitness News, the strain of the pandemic and of the ongoing effusive eruption of La Soufrière volcano is beginning to show on the faces of the citizens. End of quote. You notice he didn't mention COVID, right? He must be aware that people are dying still. And the explanation given by the medical practitioners is that they had dengue. You know that, right? But it is not mentioned here among the strain. He sees two being of critical importance and ignores the third, which is COVID-19, which is dengue. Maybe he's informed that it's past. But then again, he bright. Eyewitness News quotes Gonzalez as saying, we perhaps need as a people to pause, to reflect, to act more assuredly in ways which are inclusive, in solidarity with each other, and to be engaged fully for the long haul ahead. Right? But then hear him, they quote him, these words, pause, reflect, act, inclusive, solidarity, and engagement, incidentally constitute an instructive and an uplifting acronym, praise. That is a golden watchword. That is a golden watchword. So, you understand? In his presentation, bro, the man is telling you that he has found an uplifting acronym. Praise. People must pause. They must reflect. They must act more assuredly in ways which are inclusive, in solidarity with each other. Right? Now here it is. Just Another Look is saying to you, dear listener, that we are all uncertain as to what point Gonzalez was trying to make when he enunciated the acronym PRAISE as a golden watchword, especially in light of the fact that he has never really appeared in his tenure as this country's prime minister to be generously inclusive. Tell us when, since 2001, when he swiveled in the big chair, he has shown any penchant for inclusivity. Tell us when. Give us the example. When he has tried to be inclusive. When? Huh? In fact, he has talked about being inclusive. He has appealed for people to be inclusive, but he has not himself provided evidence of he and his party and others trying to be inclusive. When you have a man get up in your convention and say we must own the jobs too, that's not in being inclusive, is it? Because you're saying the party members must own the jobs too. We must own the country. Yeah? So, what about everybody else? So when it suited your pride and purposes, you want to be inclusive. Yeah? Even as Gonzalez threw in the call for us to be inclusive, his entire long-winded presentation to the nation, that address that he gave earlier in the week, even as he talks about being inclusive, even as he talks on being reflective, even as he talks about acting in solidarity with one another, nowhere in his speech did he find the gumption to suggest that he could lead by example and hold hands with the leader of the opposition in trying to cross the political divide and allow for an inclusive approach by the political parties of this country. You make mention of the church praying for all of us. You could have suggested at the same time that the leaders of the political parties go together in solidarity and appeal for inclusiveness in prayer, in addressing this situation. But that's not the message we got. That is not the message we got. That's the same thing we said about the airport. Even after the airport is done construction, there was no mention of the fact that on several occasions when you wanted increased budgetary allocations to facilitate this or that aspect of the airport as it headed towards completion, there's no mention at the time of the opening that you got support from the opposition. That would have reflected a desire to be inclusive, a desire to build solidarity in Vincentian society, but we never got that. And even when opposition did in fact support you in accessing additional resources for the airport, the word on the street and among your minions and even on platforms, more often than not, was they didn't have a choice. They had to support it. They see it finishing now, they want to jump on the bandwagon. But you were telling people from time to time, when it suited your pride and purpose, that it was a national project, not a party project. In the most recent elections, many of the projects were not sold as national projects. What level of engagement did we have when we decided that instead of leasing land to Sandals, we sold them? That we acquired farmers' land only to sell them to an overseas concern? What level of consultative democracy did we engage in when we were dealing with that? How do we operate in the country? You see, it is one of the features of Gonzalez's politics that defies in practice the very ideas he so often seems to hold aloft as part of a broader program of hubristic aims and objectives. There is little evidence of magnanimity. There is little evidence of statesmanship. And at times you are bothered and wonder if there is enough evidence of scholarship, of intellectualism. Gonzalez's address ignored the fact of the NDP's members of parliament being part of the nation's legislature and therefore integral to our system of governance. We appear to have forgotten that. But even in the midst of critical issues confronting the nation, Gonzalez appears incapable of bringing himself to engage the opposition New Democratic Party, the winners of the majority votes in the last general elections, on board in facilitating genuine inclusion. So you're saying one thing, but even in the saying and the use of terms, there is no sense of bridging the divide at a time of potential crisis. COVID-19 doesn't discriminate on political coloration, just as it doesn't discriminate on religious persuasion. Nor does Mama Sufre. These crises do not distinguish on the basis of politics. The consequences of these activities, of these crises, often what allows us to see political coloration. Who benefits from the lumber, galvanized steel, and cement after a disaster? That's where we see the political coloration. Who had houses built for them in the aftermath of the disastrous flooding and land slippage in December of 2013? That's where we see the political coloration. We need to remember, in 2013, remember when we had the flood and the land slippage? When Gonzales came into the country, he went around visiting, having found out that Eustace was already all over the place visiting. And he passed in his vehicle with his entourage, while Eustace was standing up talking to people around the very area where people had died through the land slippage in North Leeward. And rather than come out, and we said that on Just Another Look at the Time, rather than come out and show, even if for photo op purposes, a certain level of magnanimity and a willingness to cross the divide and to build bridges, come out the vehicle, shake Eustace's hand, stand up there and discuss the current situation, so that as the two main political parties, you'll give the impression at least that you could work together. You sat in the car, wind down the glass, and waved to say hello. That's what transpired, didn't it? So the opportunities for magnanimity, the opportunities that should give rise to actions that lead to genuine praise, not the wishy-washy pulling together of these things there to create an acronym, but genuine praise that comes from one's fundamental religious belief, as well as an understanding of what constitutes genuine morality and ethical standards. We don't get it beyond the use of the words. It is extremely difficult for many Vincentians to ever take Gonzales and his minions seriously anytime he mentions the concept of being inclusive. Like the use of the acronym PRAISE in his speech, and of his offer of love at the end of his speech, many may well see Gonzales as doing nothing more than offering a sort of Donald Trump-style pantomime that lacks substance, that lacks meaning, a sort of fakeness. A sort of fakeness. And we ask you, dear people, you be the judge. Judge whether it is carelessness or crass irresponsibility on the part of the ULP government. If we return to one of the trilogy of concerns in this country today, COVID-19, there are people who are genuinely wondering, when you tell me that the person died from dengue, is it dengue or is it COVID? But if you're going by the professions, you have to take their word for it. But even as we have people beginning now to die from COVID, we have people who are still dying from dengue, which we thought we had addressed. Clearly, we have not addressed them adequately. Eyewitness News, they said the 15th of January 2021 stated that overnight of the previous day, 62 new cases were recorded, all but one being locals. 62 cases in one day. All but one are locals with no recent travel history. Okay? When you're talking community spread, we say we object to the World Health Organization talking about community spread in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have clusters. Well, you look up in the dictionary as we did for plan and for muster point and see where's a cluster. See where's a cluster. We refuse, we vehemently reject the World Health Organization characterization of what is happening in our country as community spread. As far as just another look is concerned, we're fighting over semantics. The fact of the matter is every day more people are found to be positive. And the more numbers we have, the more our communities are endangered. Right? So if we're not locking down communities, there's a chance that the movement of peoples are going to lead to spread. So you could sit down there and fight up over whether we should call it cluster or we should call it community spread because we want to be politically correct or grammatically correct in terms of definitions of terms. The fact of the matter is more people getting COVID-19 in this country. Okay? So on the 15th, Eyewitness News say that the report late in the night of the 14th was that we had 62 new cases. 3 days later, Gonzalez took to the airwaves. And after appearing somewhat dismissive of calls for a restrictive lockdown, announced public holidays for Friday the 22nd and Monday the 25th. Right? Now, just in case you think that that is innovative or creative or whatever you want to call it, Mia Mottley did it not so long ago. It might be a bit of follow fashion, but let's deal with that later. Vincentians can well understand the significant impact that the pandemic has had and continues to have on our economy. At the same time, however, Gonzalez, who once advocated that his party would establish a consultative democracy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, has not indicated that he has ever engaged the same Vincentians in arriving at his decision not to lock down, in the face of the expansion in the number of new cases occurring almost every day. Instead, we are told evidence suggests that lockdown is necessary, more effective than staying the way we are. Evidence suggests. You heard him say that several times. Did he give you any evidence? Did he give you any evidence? He said, evidence suggests that this may not be as effective as something else, and this may not be as effective as something else, and therefore we stay as we are. But he provided none of the evidence to which he was referring. That is brilliance for you. That is intellectualism for you. That's why we ask you to employ your critical thinking skills, you know. If you want to tell me that locking down has not proven to be more effective than staying the way we are, then provide me with the evidence. Because right now you cannot explain to me why we are getting these numbers every day. It makes no sense sounding like Trump and say the more we test, the more cases we can find. Trump tell us that. We know that. And then it bother you that maybe we should have been doing more tests a lot earlier. And right now, remember, we have backlogs. Why, you say? Because we are being told by the health authorities. We are also trying to provide test results for those who have to travel. So they seem to get priority over those who stay in here. But remember, we just say that of the 62, 61 were for people who had no recent travel history. So it's a kind of crap or smoke your pipe situation. So apparently, the concept of a consultative democracy does not translate, at least apparently for Gonzalez, to engagement of Vincentians in the discourse on responding to the pandemic beyond his government's application of penalties for breaching quarantine. For all intents and purposes, it was aware that it would appear that in this country, much like the rest of the Caribbean, democracy translates into prime ministerial governance. And prime ministerial governance itself further translates into maximum leadership. And maximum leadership apparently translates into benevolent dictatorship. That seems to be the way it goes. So Gonzalez, in his own wisdom, appears to have determined that what is best for us is to grant 2 holidays. Rest. Act. Be inclusive. Act in solidarity. 2 holidays. Interestingly, while Gonzalez appears to market his 2-day holiday as being innovative, he appears nonetheless to be merely mimicking his Barbadian colleague Mia Mottley, who took a similar decision to grant 2 days holidays not so long ago. Gonzalez chooses to put it as a holiday for your health. So much for creativity. A holiday for your health. Interestingly, after scores of Vincentians have lamented the government's apparent hedging on revealing the location of COVID-19 cases, suddenly we're getting information like nobody's business. Remember? How long have Vincentians been calling into radio stations and say, well, at least you don't have to give us people's names, just tell us where the hotspots are. So we can avoid that. We can avoid the hotspots. For months, people have been calling on radio stations, and we were being told about the importance of secrecy, the importance of this, the importance of that. But on the 21st of January, 2 days ago, Eyewitness News tells us, and we quote, we're quoting the Chief Medical Officer. Right? Eyewitness News, let's quote Eyewitness News first. The COVID-19 cases confirmed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are spread across the country, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Simone Kizabich said this week. End of quote. So now we are being told it's spread all across the country. It's spread across the country. After months of telling us we have cluster, we have cluster, we have cluster. Now we're being told it is spread across the country. Then, listen, they quote, quoting Kiza this time. Therefore, we are seeing persons in the North Windward Health District, which would be Georgetown, in the North Leeward Health District, which would be Chateau-Belair, the South Leeward Health District, which would be Pembroke, and also the Calico Health District, Mesopotamia Health District, Cedars Health District, Northern Grenadines, and Southern Grenadines, she said. Hello? Now you're knowing everything, right? Now after the horse bolt out of the stable, you're getting location tooth bagay. Now we are being given the very grim reality. How long have Vincentian callers been asking for precisely this information? When our numbers were small and we were going in the reduction direction. Now we're going in the spreading direction. And now is when they're telling us North Windward Health District, North Leeward Health District, South Leeward Health District, Calico Health District, Mesopotamia Health District, Cedars Health District, Northern Grenadines and Southern Grenadines. How many more places that are left now? How long have Vincentians been suggesting that if we are aware of where clusters are located, we could better respond to them and ensure appropriate lockdown on those areas, thereby hoping to contain the spread. Eyewitness News, quoting Kisa Beach. Hear what she says? Persons are asked to be aware of the fact that the release, which stated that we were seeing the largest numbers in the Pembroke Health District, which includes Layu, it includes Bukaman. Those numbers refer to where persons live and not where persons got their tests. Where they live. Okay? End of quote. Just Another Look is saying this interjection appears to encourage Vincentian to be aware that Layu and Bukaman are apparent hotspots. However, before we close on this matter, let's quote from the Eyewitness News and what the CMO said again. However, as I said, there are cases throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and persons should be cautious where they go. That is why we are saying you should wear masks. End of quote. However, as I said, there are cases throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and persons should be cautious wherever they go. Hello, months ago, we were reducing significantly the number of cases, the number of active cases. We were never expectant that we would hear this information. There are cases throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So where is the responsibility again? When media houses and other people take to social media and start to tell people what they know or what they think they know, it's not only them we should call irresponsible, ain't it? We should be able to say that the government and its health authorities appear to be very, very irresponsible. So now we know we have cases throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we ask, why is it that our government authorities listen only to their own voices? Why is it that they listen only to themselves? When did the authorities here arrive at a stage where it has suddenly dawned on them that it should start alerting Vincentians that, you know what, we have COVID throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But remember, do not panic until we give you the order to panic. And so far, we ain't give you no order to panic. So don't panic. Just know that we can say without contradiction that the Chief Medical Officer has declared that we have cases throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Cases throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So your question is, why now? Why are you telling us now? Is it because we seem to have lost the battle over control over coronavirus? Is it because our health clinics are beginning to be inundated with cases? How now we are being told locations? How now? Why were we resistant? All these messages that we are now anxious to give should have been given when we were talking about political campaigns. You saw anybody wearing masks during the political campaigns? How many masks you saw being worn during 9 Morning celebrations? How many masks did you see people using during lighting up ceremonies? Where were the health authorities and NEMO and everybody else during those periods? Now we have not one, not two, we have 3 crises. A trilogy of crises. Dengue is still taking people's lives in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But we seem not to be anxious to mention that. You hear it in a death announcement, or you might hear it in a news item in passing, but it's not anymore given the kind of attention we believe it needs, because it's taking people's lives. So it remains in this country a very dangerous proposition, dengue. And then we have the other 2, COVID-19, spreading throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have cases throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And they keep telling us of how many they have under investigation, what is the backlog, etc. Just Another Look is therefore asking listeners, what do you interpret from what the Chief Medical Officer is now prepared to say? Would you like to ask them when they realize that we have cases throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines? But let's go back to where we were earlier when we defined what is a plan. At one of her press conferences, along with other health professionals, Kizza Beach was asked, do we have a plan? And we were told that we have a plan. And we were also told that there was a plan in 2020 which had been undergoing modification. And there's also a plan, given the fact that on top of everything else, we now have COVID, we now have Mama Soufri. But as we said in respect of Ralph Gonzalez's address to the nation, Kizza Beach has not really elucidated in precise details a plan. How many Vincentians today, listening to this program, can honestly say to themselves and their family members, we know what the plan is. We know what is the plan for combating COVID. We know what is the plan for dealing with Mama Soufri. We know what is the plan for dealing with dengue. When last they come past your place fogging? When last did you have a visit from a health inspector walking around your house to check to make sure that there ain't no containers collecting water anyway and spraying what you have exposed? When last did that happen to you? When last? So if you know of a plan, tell us. Tell your family. Tell your friends. Tell the nation. Because just another look in listening to the mouthings that we've had so far, not too certain that we can tell anybody what the plan is on any of those 3 issues. That's where we are as a nation. That is leadership. That is governance. And above all, as the Prime Minister in his address, that appears to be love. So sing praise. Sing praise because it's a nice acronym. Sing praise because it's a nice acronym. But our Christian faith tells us it's not just good words. It is action. It is not what you say. It is how you live. It is what you do each and every day of your life that tells your neighbor whether or not you are capable of love. You can keep repeating how much you love a person ad infinitum. But until that person recognizes by everything you do, exuding love, then they cannot ever say that they have experienced love from you. Perhaps the problem for us is that we have equated love with giving of gifts. But if you have the money, you could buy just about anything. That does say diddly squat about love. I could give you galvanized steel, lumber, and cement as politicians do till you're dead. It says nothing about love. We have to stop as a nation and think, but think critically. Allow our education, not the certification, our education to make sense. Insofar as we allow it to impact the quality of life of our own and of those around us. The humble individual never has to say that he or she is humble. Others experience his or her humility and laud it to he who graciously gave it, and to he or she who possesses it. That is what we have to do if we want to be serious as human beings in Vincentian society. Analyze for yourself the level of seriousness that you can accredit to the government of the day when you see what can clearly be described as irresponsible governance. Irresponsible governance. Oh yes, we can go in parliament and pass laws. We can establish bills. We can impose punitive measures. But the fact of the matter is that we seem to have dropped the ball completely on this trilogy of disasters.
www.bayhillnews.net is the parent body of Bay Hill News Network. We do Facebook Live for church service, funeral service, lecture, sporting activity. For more contact at bayhillnewsnetwork@gmail.com or call 1784-529-8340.